So now we're going to open up GoZ to transfer this head over to Maya. We'll import it into Maya. We'll extrude the geometry for some horns here, and then we'll bring it back into ZBrush and retain all of our subdivision levels. The reason we want to use GoZ to do this, if I step up my subdivision levels here and then select, say, the Move brush, if I try and pull big horns out of the sides of the head, you can see how these faces get stretched. Smaller horns you can get away with it, but the further you pull away, the more stretched these faces get. So when you try and paint detail onto this, or sculpt detail, it'll lose all of its fidelity compared to the details and the paint job that you can get in this area here. So for that reason, it's just best to have geometry there to support any sort of big protrusions you want to bring off the mesh. So with that in mind, we'll press GoZ, and that will import this mesh over to Maya. So I'll press it now, and here our mesh is loaded into Maya and ready to be manipulated. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and select these faces here all along the sides of the head. I'm going to be extruding these out to create the horns. As you can see, it's a symmetrical face selection on both sides. And all I'll do is I'll go to Edit Mesh, Extrude, and I'll just scale them out, uniform scale them down, and then scale them out again. Since we're really going to be doing all of our sculpting on this with ZBrush, it's not necessary to worry about shaping them too much in here. I'm going to select one of the edges, hold down Control and right click, go to Edge Ring Utilities, to Edge Ring and Split, and that'll split a new edge loop there. And I'll just repeat that over on the other side. I just select the edge and press G to repeat the last command. And I'll do that for all of these faces, all these edges here. I want to make sure that these long faces that we created are chopped up into individual smaller faces, so we don't run into the same problem where when we subdivide this mesh, we lose all our detail in that area. So with that ready to go, we just click the GoZ button here in the top shelf in Maya, and that'll bring us back into ZBrush. ZBrush is going to ask us if we want to transfer the high resolution details. Say yes, and there we have it. We've got our new geometry extruded out. There's one little spike there, but we can actually smooth that off. And we've retained all of our sculpted subdivision levels. You will notice, though, if you go into frame mode, our polygroups are gone, so you will have to recreate the polygroups if you still need them. So that is how we use GoZ to change the geometry in our Z tool. So this is something that would be very difficult to do before GoZ was available. Now it's a relatively simple process just to go in, carve new or extrude new faces, cut new edge loops, and then bring it back into ZBrush and retain all of our subdivision levels. So let's go ahead and start sculpting on this again. Alright, at this stage I'm just going to go ahead and finish off this character. I'm just going to do this using a combination of the clay tubes and the standard brush. So at this stage I'll probably time-lapse a bit and just continue working and just watch the techniques that I use. You'll be able to see the brushes that I select up here in the corner of the screen. And I'm just going to go ahead and take this guy through to a more finished stage. Now coming back in with that favorite brush of mine, the clay tubes with no alpha. It's really been a workhorse in this sculpture. Now that we're getting into the final stages, I'm using it as a finishing tool to come in and start pulling striations of tendons across the neck anatomy that I've already sculpted. And what that's going to do, it's going to break up the shape of that sternomastoid, and it's going to give you the impression of there being skin and tendons and other muscles stretched across it. And that's really all a result of the fact that you're losing the shadow. You're breaking that shadow that's coming around the muscle. You're allowing it to get lost in some areas, so it starts to feel like there's another material stretched over it. Now I'm coming back to the nostril and to the nose. This nose has changed a lot over the course of the sculpture. It really is something that I'm starting to like now. It's got a unique feel to it. And coming back into the nodes of the lips here, the corners of the mouth, and then the flow back to the sternomastoid, or to the masseter muscle. And taking back that crevice down the center of the head, it was looking like a buttocks there, so I wanted to get rid of that. Or it was looking a bit like maybe a brain or something, so using move to pull those cheekbones out and give them a very defined, very sharp cheekbone. Very pronounced bone structure there in the skull. And it's all the same. I could just keep revisiting the same areas, just keep moving around, and it's really just a matter of working your way around the sculpture over and over until it's done. It sounds a little silly to say it that way, but it really is the case. Hiding the lower lip now here, you can see that allows me to come in and really sculpt this upper lip and start to add the striations and the little wrinkles to that. That way I can really get in there and work that upper lip without having to worry about the lower lip getting in the way. Now if I mask it and then hide the upper lip, I can work the lower lip in the exact same fashion. There we go. Now continuing to just detail those lips using the standard brush with alpha 1. So I can just add a little bit of wrinkling in there. A little bit of detailing. Now I'm using the move brush to bring that lower lip out just a touch. And then the upper lip I'll adjust to fit to the lower. You can see here how this masking technique can be faster, I think, than the topological masking brush, especially in the higher subdivision levels, because topological masking is actually going to slow down when you get into high subdivision levels like this, because it's trying to do the math for a whole bunch of points there. It's going to actually sometimes cause the brush to really slow down to the point that you can't use it. Back to the clay tubes brush. Now I'm just stroking those folds of flesh, building up the little furrow in the center of the brow there, and just quickly, gesturally sketching the flow of skin along this along the character's head. And then here I'm just kind of playfully sort of just picking out some interesting shapes along the length of that horn. Maybe there's I just don't want it to be just a regular old horn like on any sort of bovine or other animal. I want this to be a unique horn, so I start to think about that now by adding those little negative spaces in there. Eventually there'll be extra little spikes running across that horn. Thinking about the brow ridge there underneath the horn. I don't want to lose that in that structure. And then masking out the nasolabial fold again, and then readdressing that fold of flesh. That's the fatty, fleshy bit that flows from the corner of the nose down to the corner of the mouth. And then filling in a bit of the recesses here. I'm using the smooth brush now on the neck. I've stepped down a couple subdivision levels, and I'm smoothing the neck very gently. The reason for that is because ZBrush remembers the position of all the vertices at the upper subdivision level, so if I smooth at a lower level and then step back up, it'll reintroduce that detail, but it'll be just a little bit more subtle. It sort of has the same effect of melting clay a little bit.
It's a really neat technique, and I use it a lot. I really like the effect that it has. It takes a little bit of practice to get a feel for it. It really, the secret to it is in just how low you set the Z intensity on your smooth brush. Just step down a couple subdivision levels and smooth just enough to knock back the detail. Then step back up, and ZBrush will try and reintroduce it and really make it look a lot more subtle. I'm trying to put the pit of the neck in there, and widening that. Now at this stage I decide that I want to lengthen the neck, so I've just used topology masking to mask out the head, and I'm just stretching that neck down. Just feel like you can be a lot more graceful by increasing the distance between the chin and the pit of the neck. It's kind of a common cheat when you're sculpting a female figure is to cheat the neck just a little bit longer than usual, and it just adds a sense of grace to it. And I do like, since this guy's got these big graceful horns, these big sweeping curves coming off of his head, it just seems weird to have him on this stumpy little neck. It doesn't quite work for me, so by extending that neck a little bit, it gives him a lot more of a regal, imposing demeanor, I think.